Good morning, everyone. Is this working? Yeah, thank you. My name is Kevin Dawson, President and CEO of ISA Cybersecurity, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. As well, I'll be a timekeeper, so I have my phone in front of me only from a timekeeping standpoint, but I trust the TECHNATION team will keep me on time as well. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about how we go forward and how the cybersecurity skills gap and AI and these things come together. I'm very excited to have on the panel with us a mix of other industry veterans as well as academia to carry on this conversation. And with that, I'll pass the panel down to the end and allow Joe to introduce yourself.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me? That sounds good. Okay, great. So my name is Anthony Andreoli. I'm doing my PhD at Concordia University. In particular, I'm studying vulnerability detection in binary code. So we usually look for vulnerabilities in IoT devices. Just to let you know why I'm here, we threw a hackathon, a CTF hackathon, Capture the Flag, this past weekend at Concordia, and it was co-hosted by TECHNATION. And so Tim said, hey, would you be interested in coming on this panel? And I said, of course. So that's why I'm here, and I really appreciate everyone coming out to give me a chance to make it on this panel with these big shots. So thank you.
It's great to have someone who gets their hands dirty on a panel, right? So I'm Jay Haynes, President and CEO of eSentire. eSentire is sort of credited with creating a new category in cybersecurity a number of years ago called Managed Detection and Response. We spent many years challenging the way managed security was delivered. And had great success, and now find 300 or 400 companies in that category globally. So the whole idea of what we do is we look at, we call it threat management, but something that has actually bypassed all the perimeter controls in an organization is now potentially a threat that needs to be investigated and mitigated. Most companies don't have the teams to do that 24/7. We started in the mid-market and finance, which you see is a big sector, and quantum as well. And now we find ourselves in pretty much every sector around the world. So it's and the problem is moving up market. So the enterprises are now recognizing they have the same challenge. And one might have said originally, and part of why I think I'm on the panel here, was asked to be on, was there's a skills crisis, and that applies to the small companies, the medium companies. Well, it actually applies to everyone now. So I think there's some interesting perspectives I can share from our challenges in hiring people and working with folks like you. So I'll hand it right over to you.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Rushmi Hasham, Director of Workforce Training at Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst, Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson University. We are the university's non-for-profit National Center for Cybersecurity. And one of the things that we did in our early days was to engage with eSentire and other like-minded industry leaders, and being able to understand who is not represented in cybersecurity and what were the skills that were needed. And this was 5 years ago. And so we started to identify these gaps, and we started to realize women, new Canadians, individuals who had been displaced from non-traditional tech sectors such as hospitality were not being represented in cyber. And we started to build workforce training programs, rapid reskilling programs, and now we, as a National Center for Cybersecurity, also accelerate businesses in cyber. We work in corporate training across the country, working with corporations in upskilling, and we've trained over 1,000 individuals into many, many jobs across the country. So thank you for inviting me, and we're really excited. I'm excited to be here because eSentire was one of the reasons why we started our center.
Turn on the mic.
Yes,
thanks.
The mic.
Good morning, and thank you to TECHNATION for inviting us. I'm Andrew Buckles. I'm the cyber services owner at ISA Cybersecurity. What we do is we help Canadian organizations of all shapes and sizes understand the controls that are required within their cybersecurity program. Cybersecurity is not a one-size-fits-all problem. Every business is unique and has different types of challenges. So we work with them to assess, understand what their roadmap should look like, what level of sophistication they need in the controls in their control framework. We help them implement those controls, and then we help them manage it day to day. So my team is focused on the delivery side. So I have a whole team of subject matter experts that make me look good every day and help our customers keep Canadians safe. So thank you.
Great, thank you, panel. And I'll be down here with a question in just a second. But in terms of kicking off, I was inspired a bit by the keynote today on quantum, and many in computer field know the notion of Moore's law and how the acceleration. There's the law of accelerating growth, and I can say that nowhere more is there a perfect example of that in the space of cybersecurity, especially over the past 5 to 10 years. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I'd say in the last 5 years, my sleepless nights have gone up exponentially over the previous 15 years in this industry. And so with that, I will kind of in the accelerated growth in both the technology space and the threat actors and all those other things, that by itself creates a challenge in academia and being able to keep up. So my first question, kind of what role, and maybe this is, I can ask you, Rushmi, what role does academia play in kind of trying to keep up with the rapid change that we're seeing in cyber, in cyber being leveraged by AI and those things as well?
Oh, very big question. Thank you. Academia needs to partner more with industry, first of all, when it comes to designing and starting to look at what training is required, because we're filling a unique gap. So there's two aspects of academia. One is the long-term view of the multi-year programs where we want really thoughtful skills, building in analytical skills as we're building out our programs, but we need the input now from industry, from all of you on the panel and everyone here that's listening, because everything's changing. And we look at curriculum change, it's every 3 months. Something has to be changed, reflected, version updates. So as industry updates happen or new threats are detected, it has to be a feedback loop. And we are not really good in academia, traditionally, of creating these feedback loops. So we have to make sure that we're listening and responding and asking the right questions. So that way we can bring it to our students, we can bring it into the classroom and make it move from theory to practical. And that's where the catalyst for us, we were able to create, and that's why the university put us on the side. We're not in the actual university. We sit outside the university, so we can create programming reflective of the needs of the industry. And I think, and that's why our programs are like fast-paced sprints, 6 months, and you're in the industry. And we're creating a gray space inside academia. And more education institutions are starting to come up and starting to look at our model and starting to respond, because we can't do it alone. So I think the more that we listen to the needs and really have our curriculum reviewed, and we need this feedback loop, and we're not seeing it because we're not getting the engagement from industry. And I'd like to learn, how do we invite industry to our tables? Because without that, we're not going to create the talent that Canada needs to be safe.
Right. Anthony, yeah, do you have any?
100%, I 100% agree with you. The only thing is, I'm just not sure about how we're going to make these things part of the curriculum, because theoretically it's a nice idea, but to actually get these things to happen in the curriculum, okay, there's a lot of things that are going to stop you, like the regulations for creating a new program and so on and so forth. But the other thing you said, I think, is really important, which is get industry involved with academia. Okay, we have that a lot, actually. In particular, my lab, we work with the CSE, we work with Thales, we work with Ericsson, we work with Hydro-Quebec, and that's where we learn our biggest lessons, right? They have data that we don't have, and they give it to us, and we can start solving new problems. So the industry can feed us problems, they can feed us data, and, you know, academics, we can survive on meager amount of finance, so we can sit there and try to solve these problems over and over until we come up with something. And that's actually the name of the game in academia, right? Is to innovate with modern problems. So I would agree with that completely.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and first off, you're not like other academic institutions. You're in another league altogether, because you do a great job of working with the partners, as challenging as you might see it. The thing, the perspective that is often not understood outside of the industry is you're in a day-to-day knife fight with an adversary that has first mover advantage. What that means is you have to be listening to the signals and detecting when they've come up with some new methods. And those methods are sometimes their whole purpose is to basically evade all the methods that can detect and contain them. So you have to basically figure out how to trap things that you've never seen before and then take countermeasures. So you can't write a course that does that, right? So this is the challenge that you have. And if you kind of look at the evolution, and Kevin will know this one, going to the RSA show, which is the annual now 40,000 attendee conference. Every year there's a new kind of threat, and there's a new blinky light thing for the data center, right? So I think there's 80 categories now, according to the various analysts. It's a very fragmented industry, and you have very conflicting technology and skill sets required. Like just in the research side, that there's a whole body of knowledge and thousands of researchers doing just what you do, and there's 79 other categories of similar complexity but very different. So I think it's important to understand that as part of the challenges that you have. Even if you look at engineering inside an organization, you have a design statement and a problem, and engineers go off and design the solution. And 2 weeks from when you start that, it's already out of date in a sense. So this is a constant challenge we have in the industry.
If there's still time, I got a couple of thoughts. JP, you're talking about the whack-a-mole game that is our industry, and that's very, very true. And I think you were talking earlier, Kevin, about Moore's law and this accelerated growth curve, and we're seeing with AI that Moore's law doesn't even apply anymore, because it's starting to actually technology is growing much more rapidly than it has in the past. I think education is extremely important, because cybersecurity is an industry where it's sitting on top of other things. If you want to be a cybersecurity analyst, or if you want to be a vulnerability expert, if you want to be an offensive security specialist, whatever kind of domain you get into within our industry, you need to understand how infrastructure works, how digital systems work, how software works, how does network work, and you need to be well educated. And I think what's happening generally in society is that the systems that we rely upon, whether they're digital or otherwise, they're getting more complicated. And in order to support those systems and to come up with new ideas and new defense mechanisms, as we see new attack scenarios that come out, we need to make sure that we have a highly educated workforce that can think about these problems and come up with new solutions. Because there is not going to be a blueprint for that next attack scenario. So people are going to have to figure out what are those controls that we need to create to stop those new attack scenarios.
Thank you. That was fantastic. And in that notion, the Catalyst is very, very well known for its upskilling. People have a fundamental basis of knowledge when they join your program. It might not be cyber. It might be other things in the industry, but this is probably a better question for JP and Andrew. In kind of how does industry support cybersecurity emerging workforce that we need to have to do this? And you kind of touched on a bit, Andrew, but the diversification of skills that are required in that to support academia and industry.
You want me to go first? Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously, we support academia quite a bit. We have a partnership with the University of Guelph. We do co-ops with many of the colleges. It's extremely important for our business to be able to support the future workforce, to identify new talent, to help train that new talent. Typically it takes about 6 months in a co-op before a new student is proficient in being able to support our needs in the business, and creating that future workforce and that talent pipeline is necessary, because as our business continues to grow, we have to be able to do that. So how do we do that? How can industry help and support? Well, we participate in programs to do different types of workshops. So it could be offensive security exercises, or providing specialists from our team to the universities to help support those higher education programs. The co-op programs are really important as well. And I think academia can continue to evolve by adding more programs, because in our business, there's probably about a dozen or so different specializations. And, when you come into the industry, you may be more of a generalist, and you can go into different specializations. I think academia can support by offering more of those specializations, so that they're coming out of university with some practical skill sets that we can leverage on day one.
Yeah, and on your prior comments, it sort of got me thinking about one of the challenges that we see is the base skills of how information technology works, how networks work, how cloud works, how cloud and networks work, how remote offices work, and so forth. And oftentimes, and this is one of the challenges academia has, is they bring in the raw material, the ball of clay, and then they mold it into a trained, certified, call it book smart analyst. And we've had this isn't a commentary on Catalyst, it's across the board. We can have folks that'll come in with very high grades, but they actually, we have to teach them what UDP is, or is different from TCP, which you think is the most fundamental thing. And this is very common, and it messes up our training regime. We still like the candidates, but something that might take 3 months, all of a sudden it's taking another 3 that we have to invest in them to get them up to that level. But there's also and this is where the diversity point, I think, is quite valid. One of the things that makes you very good, at least in our, I'll talk about our Security Operations Center, where we have probably 150 odd resources that are at level 1 through level 4. Level 4s are 10-year plus veterans. Level 1 is our version of the ball of clay. When we bring them in, we run them through intensive training and certifications. And we have domains that are endpoint, and others that are network, and others that are cloud and logging based. And each one of those, we put them through a certification internally on our own training. And every time they achieve one of those, we actually increase their salary. Because one of the challenges that you have is very competitive as an employer. Salaries are always, the next door neighbor firm is figuring out a way to scoop your staff. So they actually increase their salary through 5 certifications, and then they have enough time in the role that they then can be eligible to move up to the level 2. That's another salary increase, and then we send them on external training and more certifications. So I don't know if anyone's heard the saying where the manager comes to his VP and says, I can't believe we have to spend this money on training these people. What if they leave? And it's what if we don't train them and they stay? Right? You got to think about it that way. With the backdrop of everything is changing all the time. So on the diversity front, the one observation I would make is it's very hard to there's no sort of one standard definition. You need somebody that's curious, and they come from every walk of life. Someone that's curious, they want to capture the flag. We like to say, or I do, that there's one part air traffic controller, one part network engineer, and one part Fortnite. And we need those 3 affinities for long-term success, because they literally are fighting. It's like a video game in a sense, and they've got to quickly detect and contain the adversary. So the diversity is across all aspects of the way people think.
That's very very interesting, and it almost, in some senses, kind of flies against academia traditionally, where you have specific programs. Our keynote today talked about mathematics or compute or physics, and typically people in academia pick one stream, and what you're talking about is almost the notion of a jack of all trades who then comes in and can then specialize on specific areas, but they need to know a little bit of all these pieces so they know how they fit together. Very insightful. Thank you very much. So I'm going to switch gear a bit here and open up to the panel to answer. In the notion of this change in organizations, how do we incentivize? We are all involved in cybersecurity every day, both from an academia and industry standpoint, but a lot of organizations are not. And so how do we incentivize those that are not to kind of pick up the torch and pick up the challenge and then integrate cybersecurity into their training, into their platforms, workflow?
You can start if you like.
Well, you were more ready than I was.
Okay.
Go ahead. That's right.
Well, I could say this. So basically, like if you know anything about, let's say, the topic of operand conditioning, there's 3 ways to incentivize. You can punish, you can remove punishment, and then you can reward. And so you have to decide which one of those you want to use, or the combination of them, to incentivize. Okay. I would opt for reward usually, because I've seen the other ones and they don't really work that well. But you can reward companies for doing things like creating bug bounty programs, right? Like Netgear has some of those, right? And they'll give you money if you find vulnerabilities in their products. But if we incentivize those types of initiatives, then I think we're going to be in the right direction, because some of these companies don't have these hardcore security practices that we hope they do, and they're not keeping up with all these new pieces of technology and these new services to help secure their products. They're just not keeping up. I can just give you a quick example. Our lab just finished getting public disclosure for a bunch of vulnerabilities in Netgear products. Okay, it's on their website now. And those vulnerabilities are extremely embarrassing. It was actually me and my friend who found them. Okay, they're written in the same function. They're very easy to see from a developer's perspective. So why are those vulnerabilities in those products, right? So it's very strange to see these things happen. And I think it's indicating that there is a lack of protection at the most base level. Okay, so that's my comment there.
That was very good. I'm glad you went first. I'm going to take a little different approach to incentivizing individuals to take up the torch for cyber. And I do want to clarify one point. I'm not academia. So I'm not in the academic side at all. I get the freedom to create programs without having to go through Senate and approval and creating rapid training programs. But to incentivize individuals to come into cybersecurity who've never touched it, I think we need to start to appeal to what cybersecurity means to individuals who are not in it. We may see it from a point of view of it's very technical, looking at technical skills, but how do we bring individuals in who are intimidated by these technical ideas and they want to be participating? So one of the things that we do, and I do because this is why I'm in cyber, is appealing to the fact that cybersecurity is a very human terminology. We've applied human values to cyber. Cybersecurity exists because we need to protect the basics of how our society functions. And we want to be able to protect our schools. We want to protect our financial institutions so we can protect commerce. We want to protect our government so we can protect our democracies. And the minute that you apply very human values to the word cybersecurity, oh my gosh, the interest increases. That's when those stories become real. That's when you have a school teacher saying, I want to go into cybersecurity. I don't know anything about technology. And they enter into a training program. And within 6 months, that passion drives them because they found their why. And now they're working maybe at eSentire or somewhere at RBC or at Rogers, and they're giving their passion. Or the chef who's never touched technology before. And she says, I've had enough of being a head chef. But she knows that she wants to be in cyber. And why? And you ask her why, and she says, because I saw a breach happen to my mother. The human values. So the more that we can tell these stories, and the more that we can show the transferable skills, and for the chef, it's about, she can see 10 orders down, right? She can predict, I need to organize my kitchen and my team to see 10 orders down. Then she's got that ability to see 10 threats down, the ability to communicate, the ability to be in the heat, in the moment, and to be able to stand up and identify where those threats are, what are the solutions. So we need to incentivize society by giving them these stories of human values, because cybersecurity is not a technical problem. It requires technical skills. It's a human issue for the way we live. Sorry, I get very passionate.
I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on the incentive side, because I do think, it's all about carrots and sticks, 100%. I think the sticks are a little more important, unfortunately, than the carrots today. So what do we need to incentivize organizations to put in cybersecurity controls when they are not cybersecurity focused? I think it's legislation, regulation, and legal consequences if they're executing bad behaviors. I think the incentive structures today for many organizations is not aligned to a secure posture. You think about a company, I'm not going to pick on Netgear, but it was mentioned. The incentive structure for a Netgear is to get new features out, new products to market, to try and put those products out on the market that their users are going to pay for, that they want to pay for. Well, that's in direct conflict with funding cybersecurity controls. So if the business is left with a decision to put budget towards new features and functions that can help them increase their revenues, or put the budget towards cybersecurity controls that can make sure those devices that they're creating or that software that they're creating, or whatever services they provide to all of us as citizens or consumers of those products and services, they're not going to make that decision unless they have to. Now, the good news is cybersecurity, at the end of the day, it's not a technical problem. It is a business problem. It is a risk problem. And without risk, you can't have reward, but organizations need to assess and manage that risk. And I think big problem today is many are not, and they don't know what their cybersecurity risk is. And that really exposes them to major problems, often ending up in the news or impacting us, in the services that they provide, whether it's financial services or utilities or, retail, whatever that happens to be. So I'm more on the stick side for now, but, I think carrots are important too. And I think government can help, especially with the smaller business that maybe can't afford to assess the risk and put in some of these controls. Government can play a role by providing programs, educational programs, or subsidizing maybe insurance premiums, or things of that nature to help those organizations that don't have the same resources as a national enterprise does.
Yeah, I was going to go down the exact same path, the stick and the carrot. And we built the business around working with financial services firms. New York City was the main commute for years. And basically the industry, everything happens first there. Right? All the newest technologies, the biggest spenders, it all seems to start in financial services. So what we saw evolve there in the carrot and stick context was the highest level regulator in the US is the FFIEC, and under them they have various other legislation. The SEC regulates trading organizations, and what was happening was the counterparties, like say the Goldman Sachs or the Citibanks, were being regulated by FFIEC, and they were actually pushing their regulations down to the smaller financial services firms that are trading money in market feeds and everything. So what was happening is they were being assessed using these, like the largest assessment we saw was 1,500 different audit points. This is your world, Andrew, right? And so 1,500 audit points for a little firm is overwhelming. So what it became was, so the stick was, you can't work with us unless you can get a satisfactory risk score on this, became the carrot in that it was a hunting license. So once you invested in cybersecurity, you now could trade with everybody, and you weren't going to be restricted. And fast forward, I guess 10 years, there's actually a marketplace that firms get assessed once, and the big financial institutions subscribe to this, and they see what their assessment is. So now there's a whole sub-industry just keeping track of what your compliance is, and so we're seeing this happen in other segments as well. But that's I think that's the hybrid, the combination of carrot and stick is affected. The commercial world solves it in their own way, a little bit of regulation, and then the government steps back and lets it take care of itself.
These are all great answers, and they've kind of inspired a couple of things in me, because I'm equally as passionate as you, Rushmi, in this area. I think of, and you went to, I think of Simon Sinek's Getting to Your Why. And you talked about cybersecurity and being a very daunting term, and people think it's a technical term, and you have to be technical to be in cybersecurity. Our why as an organization is quite simply keeping people safe. You humanize it and make it about keeping people safe. You used examples of hospital breaches, and now and we joke because we are very we do a lot in the hospital sector, as does JP's company, and my mother, before she passed, she didn't understand what I did as an industry, and she said, well, it's not like you're saving people. And I'm like, well, in some cases we may be, if we're helping to keep the lights on in a hospital. So I'm equally passionate about it in that regard. And you had said, JP, about kind of the industry and 200 plus vendors in it. And the reason I think that is because it's a team sport. Like, there's that many people because there's that much work to be done. And it really comes down to kind of everyone participating and everyone getting this notion of how do I help keep everyone safe. So I appreciate that. It was great. Another question that has come up most recently, and And it's an interesting one because the topic might have not been talked about as much in the last 3 years. But the role of AI, open AI, or as Elon Musk would like to have it called now, closed AI, in the last couple of days. What's the role of AI in cybersecurity and academia?
Ooh.
Anthony?
Oh, sorry, I was
ahead.
watching him. Well, look, for generative AI, actually, I used it to generate the answer to this question. So, this, so basically, from a perspective of creating malware, right? It used to be that the attackers had to become innovative by themselves and find ways to sort of go over the detection systems, right? So they would find more novel ways to obfuscate their patterns so that common detection systems couldn't see them. But now they don't have to innovate as much because these generative systems can create that obfuscation. And so that's going to cause a big problem in defense because now defense has to adapt much faster to those types of obfuscation techniques, which are above what we were able to even conceive of before. So I think the speed of attack and defense is going to increase, which is maybe going to give all of us ulcers, I don't know, but it's a problem in that respect.
I think the short answer is to be determined, but the longer answer is it's definitely going to have an impact 100%. Actually, JP used a term earlier that I can't remember what you said, but it was effectively there's a bigger incentive on the attacker side and the defender. You know, generative AI is 100% going to make it a lot easier for the attacker initially. And if you think about our industry today, you know, the attacker and the defender, the red team and the blue team, the red team today has to find one vulnerability. And when I say vulnerability, you know, there's a bunch of different types of vulnerabilities. You can find vulnerabilities in people and process, you know, in organizational structures, in the actual technical controls. You can find technical vulnerabilities in binaries, as an you know, where Anthony's expertise is. And you just have to find one to get in the door to be able to cause damage and harm or accomplish whatever objective you're looking as a red teamer. The blue team has to be right all the time. So if you have hundreds and hundreds of vulnerabilities and you don't necessarily know where they all are because you don't have a very robust control framework to find them all, and the attacker can use generative AI to find all of those vulnerabilities quickly and effectively and target the ones that are the highest risk, you know, this is going to create a bit of a Pandora's box where the attacker will be much, much, much more successful than the defender over the next few years. So there's going to be tools that'll come out to help the defender, but I think that those are going to lag on the attacker side. And we're already starting to see it. You know, there was an organization, I think in Hong Kong, where there was a video call that was stood up, and they were extorted out of $35 million, or the equivalent of 35 million Canadian dollars. And nobody was real on that call, but they were all mimicked of employees. And that's an example of a vulnerability. You know, they're not exploiting that poorly written code on software, but they understood that this particular person that they were targeting had some authority to make decisions, and they knew who that person was connected to. They knew their team members. They knew what they looked like. They had their voices. They knew what kind of language that they were going to use when they got onto a call, and they tricked them to you know, wire money, or and it cost the business quite a bit. So this is going to be a real problem. I think generative AI is going to have massive impacts on all industries, including ours. And we'll see how it plays out.
It's, you know, great couple points there. One of them is it's, you know, if the adversaries use all the same technologies, to your point, Andrew, that we use to defend organizations and make them better in every other way, in you know, just, you know, for you know, commercial reasons. They have no rules of the road. They abide by no laws, and it's basically almost frictionless compared to all the constraints that we work under. So if you take that context, you know, LLMs will be incorporated into threat actors' tradecraft, and this is basically the techniques, a combination of malware and other techniques and tactics that they use to make their way into your network. There's a term they call the cyber kill chain, and the kill chain is basically think of it as a bunch of sequential steps that the adversaries have to go through to achieve their objectives. And and when you read about hacks, it sounds like there was, they went in, did their thing, and left. And it doesn't work that way. It tends to go over a number of hours or days, more typically. So there's usually no less than 10 for them to get in. So there'll be an initial way they get in. It's usually a human invites them in inadvertently by going to a website or opening a document that has the malware in it. And then it drops a payload. It's doing some reconnaissance. It's then sending what it's discovered back to the evil layer we call the command and control channel. And then decisions are made by the human actors. And then they send more payload down. Say they're running Symantec or McAfee. They send in the thing to get by that. They get by that, and they want to move laterally, escalate processes. You kind of get the idea. There's a lot of steps, and there's a lot of back and forth. So all of those are repetitive human tasks. And the things that I think the industry, everyone in LLMs and generative AI would agree that it's today a great solution for repetitive human tasks. So what we will see is those 10 steps. Every one of those steps, by the way, is a detection opportunity for firms like ours. And we try to get them early on, and we don't want to get them late in the game, because if you miss the last one, then it's a headline. So you have opportunities in there to do detection and containment. And we would see about 50% of adversaries achieve objectives within 48 hours. That time frame is compressed since maybe 2010. It was 8 weeks, just to give you an idea. It's compressed down to just a few, and we've seen them complete objectives in 12 hours. So when they drop the LLM in there to compress 8 steps into basically one, all of a sudden we have far greater risk in that can we as defenders be able to keep up with the LLM? So we have to bring the same technology to the fight. So it's going to basically be bot wars, and so we're actively working on this right now. So that's one context. Another one, which you may have heard a term called living off the land, which is where the adversaries get in. They don't even drop malware. They just use PowerShell and some other stuff that they can find in your network environment, is in fact an LLM called Copilot. And Copilot's available for network administrators. There's a Copilot for this is Microsoft's term, but there's other versions of it. And they can affect great change very quickly using LLMs that are part of how we run our networks now. So that's on the horizon. I don't know if you heard it here first, but we see that as a very existential threat, and building traps for that. And then there's another area where firms are using LLMs to achieve business advantage. So they're reducing repetitive human tasks. You've heard of 100-to-1 reductions in cases like say payment authorization and approvals in a regular workflow. So gaming those LLMs internally is another risk that's coming up. So we see it in multiple different ways, and we're building. Think of them as tactical micro defenses using LLMs against LLMs. And I think that's going to be the near-term future. May get bigger and more hairy as these get smarter, and quantum computing makes them go faster.
Another mole?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to ask a question. Maybe it won't be addressed today, but so everybody's mentioned about repetitive human tasks being eliminated. What does that mean for us who are skilling and reskilling and upskilling individuals? Where do you need us to put our attention because of generative AI?
That's a very good question. I think that there's always going to be a need for critical thinkers forever. Like that's always going to be a need. So I think, universities have always, and, I was in the engineering department at the university that I went to, it's the University of Guelph. They don't teach you necessarily how to do something specific out in the workforce. They teach you how to think. And I think in our industry, that's going to be critically important. We talk about the whack-a-mole game. We talk about how there's now large language models. How does that change the game? We need people in our industry that can understand those concepts, and they can apply their knowledge to create new technologies, new tools, new processes, new solutions, as opposed to focusing on the repetitive tasks. So I think you're absolutely right. Generative AI, I think today, is very good at certain tasks. And there's lots of tasks that I think can be automated by a generative AI. Eventually, it'll be much better at processes, which is a collection of tasks. And that's where it's headed. And when it goes there, I think that the workforce of the future really needs to be focused on that critical thinking aspect, problem solving, and not necessarily repeating what they've been told and memorizing certain steps within a process. Being able to come up with those steps on their own is going to be really important.
In a crude analogy, it would be, if you go back to when they invented the automobile, you almost had to be a mechanic to get it to run. And really all you need to do is get from A to B. And then you could think about what the mission is. And it's very similar to that. You don't have to know how to, know how an engine works to drive nowadays. And to answer your question, we get them thinking on much bigger problems instead of something that's very, it's not value added. It's not strategic. It's very tactical. So I think that's where it goes, strategic thinking.
So with only 5 minutes left, I got the hand up a few minutes ago. If I can go down the line and start with Anthony in kind of 1 minute or less, final thoughts. What would you say in terms of this topic discussion and your ask, I guess, for the audience or those attending remotely?
Well, I think this is what we spoke about at the beginning. If you are an industry player and you are looking for innovation and you're looking for solutions to problems, I would say at least bring some of that to us in academia, because we are like dry sponges there waiting for these problems. And we really want to help solve some of them. And I know we're doing a quick turnaround with problems and solutions, but I think that's the name of the game for academia, and that's where we can help the most. And I really appreciate having these big players here give me a new insight into how to look at these problems, because my view is a little bit constrained. So thank you so much, guys.
The SpongeBob of cyber. Couldn't resist. I would say, we've worked with lots of folks from the various agencies over the years, and one of the things that sticks with me is, and this kind of is a perspective, if you can think of it, they're probably already doing it or planning to. And so the creativity of the adversary, while they are morally corrupt, is to never be underestimated. And we as a society have to take this far more seriously. I worry about supply chains like food security. And we've had a couple of very high profile customers that came to us because they had a disruption in their chain, and they literally had products rotting after a couple of days. And if you think of somebody doing that intentionally, and given some of the geopolitical stuff going on, that's what keeps me up at night. So we need to rally the troops, which is all the corporate leaders in our country and south of the border, although they seem to be more awake to this, and start taking action.
That's actually a really interesting point. Why are they ahead of us, the South? But well, that's another topic. I'd like to invite anybody who is thinking about a career in cyber to look for your why and really think about the security aspect, the security of our nation, the security of our supply chains, of our food, of our critical infrastructure, how we keep our lights on, where we get our water, how our children get educated, our thoughts that come to us, are they really ours? If these are the things that you think about, then you're ready for a career in cybersecurity. And for industry, I'm going to put an open call. We're going to be hosting many roundtables and advisories, and we need your input. We need to know what's coming. We need to know what your pain points are, what you're seeing, and be our eyes and help us to be keep our feet on the ground, but looking forward as well. So join us.
I'll close with this. I was on holidays a couple weeks ago in Florida, and we decided to do a tour of NASA. It was my second time going. And I love it there. And, when you think about that program and what it was and what it is, it's about solving the impossible problems. And, impossible is not even a word in their vocabulary. I think cybersecurity, that industry, is certainly on that frontier. It's a new industry. There's lots of challenges that we have in front of us. There's lots of challenges that we're not even aware of that we're going to have. And if you're interested in getting into a field that is dynamic, that requires, that critical thinking that we were just talking about, problem solving, very complex problems, this is a field that you should look at very seriously. So that would be my closing thoughts for anyone that's considering a career in cyber.
And I'll just wrap up with kind of, I think, fundamentally framing the problem. And we talk about critical infrastructure. We talk about all those things that we need to have in our lives to function. And all of those things have their own singular focus. Hospitals are in charge of taking care of people. Food distribution is, and farmers are in charge of growing it. And yet, and the threat actors are in charge of, or their only job, their singular focus is security breaches. And yet all those other organizations have to have security as part of them. And in fact, the threat actors are leveraging all those other things as well. They get food, they probably go to hospitals, they do all those things, but it's not part of their business, whereas security has to be a part of everyone's business. And organizations like JP's and ours are singular focused on cybersecurity, but that's fundamentally the problem, is they have one myopic purpose. So thank you everyone on the panel today, and thank you TECHNATION for giving us the opportunity to come up here and share with you.
I actually, we're just about to move into a break for about 15 minutes till 1:45. I just think it would be a shame if we didn't let at least one audience question. So if anyone needs to excuse themselves, you're certainly welcome to. But if anyone would like to pose a question to this panel, I can come over.
Hi, thank you. This was super interesting. So I work with NPower Canada, which I think is in a similar space to Catalyst, and we're just starting to sort of upskill people. We work very much with underserved communities. In Quebec, we do a great deal of work with new arrivals. What we're seeing as a potential challenge is we have a lot of really talented, really skilled people. And we're hearing from the cyber community that they need these people, but because there's perhaps they're new arrivals, that question of who you let into the world of cyber, we're seeing a bit of a wall. Can you give advice or comment on what we can do to help some of these really talented people from underserved communities or new arrivals to Canada to help break in and support you guys?
Do you want to go first, or want me?
I can give one perspective. We have many of our customers require that we do background checks on people, and you have to do criminal and credit background checks. That's a problem for newcomers to the country. So it depends where they come from, whether you can get any reasonable background check. But that's actually in our contracts, or like it's part of the relationship, particularly in finance. In Europe, it's in many jurisdictions illegal. And so the higher the privacy regime, which Canada has a very high privacy regime, we will see that disappear as something that we can do. So we know that's where the puck is going in privacy, and we operate in the high privacy regimes of Europe and Canada. So what you have to do is then it's incumbent on us to, whoever is accessing client systems, we have to have sort of extreme monitoring of them, and use LLMs and other anomaly detections to be able to make the assertions to our customers that there's, and this is all a big data problem. You just basically see the normal pattern, and then the normal pattern, once it's deviating, it sends alarms and somebody investigates. That's what you have to do in the practical sense.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, and then one other thing. Our hands are tied a lot of the time, as JP was saying. We have contracts that require us to have those background checks they have to clear, and sometimes that's difficult to do when they're not a Canadian citizen. And then we actually have some contracts where we have to have Canadian citizens only involved in those clients, and so that makes it even harder. There's no real answer to that problem other than they're probably going to have to pass certain reliability clearance background checks and possibly get citizenship in some cases.
Okay, thanks. Do you see that potentially changing or loosening, or us having perhaps a sped up version as you're seeing a bigger demand for labor and the Canadian workforce is going to become more and more probably new arrivals or underserved communities that don't have those traditional trackable histories?
I could see the government making it easier to get, or quicker, or more rapid to get those clearances, but I don't see that requirement going away. The types of data and the type of information that we're looking at and have access to is extremely sensitive, especially when you're talking about responders. They're often touching the crown jewels of an organization, and those organizations, you're talking about your money, right, in the financial services institutions. Or you're talking about, clean water, drinking water. You're talking about national security risks. So no, I personally don't see those requirements being removed, but possibly having more rapid, I know especially since COVID, I don't know if it's been the same for you, JP, but getting those reliability clearance checks passed and secret clearance passed, it has taken longer. So I see that potentially being a solution.
one of the other challenges is we operate in 80 countries. And you have privacy legislation in different countries that are conflicting with being a global operation. It's the same problem that cloud providers have. So, so there's certain segments Andrew alluded to, like you work for the Canadian government, you need Canadian controlled goods as one example, or in the U.S. CMMC, ITAR. There's all, and you know, some of them require to have U.S. eyes on U.S. soil. Some of them are in a room with no windows called a SCIF, and there's all versions of that. So it depends partly on where the companies are operating. And how much latitude you have on these.
I would just recommend, you know, some of those hurdles for our new Canadians to maybe pivot them towards the smaller enterprises, the smaller businesses, because they're starving for talent and knowledge. And it gives them time in the country to build up their expertise, their experiences, to receive their permanent residency towards their citizenship. So one day they can be able to work for the larger companies, which are highly regulated, because the SMEs are getting hammered. Our small businesses in Canada are just, they don't have the resources and the abilities. So I think pivoting the attention away from high regulatory industries, and because everybody wants to work for a bank, the security of a bank, the mentality of that, but to shift that perception of employment.
That's a great point.
And we have time for just one more here.
My question is aimed at Rushmi. I got very inspired by all your comments, but not to work in cyber. I'm mainly interested in your feedback loop concept. So have you thought more about this? Have you set up an advisory committee with industry?
Yes, we do have an advisory board that I have established. And this advisory board, we give as much as we get back from them. So we talk about topics that are just not technical. We want to be able to look at the entire talent management pipeline for industry, and talking about everything from how do you create an employment brand for cybersecurity? What is it that you do to attract? And so we give them ideas and we receive information back. We even talk about pay and retention in cyber. And because all of that matters. And then we talk about training programs within companies. What is the gaps that companies are training for? Can we take some of that burden on? And then how do we, so that feedback loop is constant. And we do ask them about what are the top 5 things that you're looking at? One of the things that we've learned from some of our finance clients, our large bank, is regulatory, and the regulatory issues of having individuals who are coming on board that have the accreditation. So we go and we strive to match those accreditations into our program so individuals can serve those communities. So this feedback loop is very active and we implement very quickly. So it's one thing to receive the input, but it's the action and the speed to action in an industry that's constantly changing. So if you're going to set up an advisory committee and you're looking for this feedback loop, you have to demonstrate that you're taking it seriously and implementing it.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.